I'm getting a divorce because I'm remarrying the manager's daughter.
Up until that point, Henry was still laughing it off. But the situation changed drastically a week later. That was just a few hours ago. Henry was approached by the chairman during a company visit.
How's my granddaughter doing?
Huh?
I'm talking about my granddaughter Claire. She became your wife, didn't she?
It was then that Henry finally understood the situation. He turned pale. How panicked was Henry? It's not hard to imagine. But so what? I was many times more upset. The feeling of being betrayed by someone you trusted right in front of you is something you can't understand with just that. So I'm going to teach Henry the despair of being betrayed right in front of your eyes. You can't escape anymore. Just now, you have placed yourself on the brink of despair. I smiled. My name is Claire Danes. At 38 years old, I am now working as a contract employee. When I got married 13 years ago, I quit my job once. But we couldn't save enough money to buy a house. So, after discussing it with my husband Henry, who works at the same place, I returned to my old job as a contract employee. In fact, that decision was not wrong. Since going back to work, we've been able to save money smoothly. However, not everything is going perfectly. Actually, there's a troublemaker at work named Catalin. Catalin is always late and doesn't do her job. When someone calls her out, she always says,
I'll tell my dad.
Catalin's father is the sales manager, who is my and Henry's boss. So both Henry and I find it hard to reprimand her. What should I do about Catalin? Lately, that's all I've been thinking about. Anyway, it's my responsibility to supervise Catalin. I have no choice but to firmly reprimand her. I sighed as I looked at the clock. It was past 9:30. Catalin hadn't come yet. Just as I thought, she's late again.
Good morning.
A drawn-out greeting echoed from the entrance. When I turned around, there was Catalin, looking sleepy. Catalin, do you know what time it is?
Don't ask me, just look at the clock yourself.
Catalin snorted. I held back my rising anger. That's not the point. You're late.
Huh? Late? So what?
Catalin showed no signs of remorse. In fact, she seemed to be getting defensive. Listen, you're an adult. I decided today was the day I would finally address this properly. Just as I began to speak,
You're annoying. If you have complaints, I'll tell my dad.
huh? Your dad?
Yes, I'll tell my dad that there's a woman here who bullies me at work.
Catalin smirked. I could only sigh. Here we go again. But giving up here was always my mistake. I steeled myself. I continued, looking straight at Catalin. If you want to tattle, go ahead. As long as you do your job, you can say whatever you want.
Ugh, what's with this old lady?
Catalin slammed her bag on the desk. The employees nearby flinched. Of course, I was startled too, but I couldn't show it. Why are you late?
It's none of your business.
Is it something you can't explain? Don't you have any sense of responsibility as an adult? When I asked, Catalin pouted.
You're so annoying. Who cares?
It's not fine. This isn't a child's play. Just as I was about to reprimand Catalin, I heard clapping. I turned towards the sound to see the manager, David, standing there. David said to me,
That's enough lecturing. Get back to work.
But David, I tried to protest. But Catalin cut in first.
Daddy, this woman.
Catalin sidled up to David and whispered something in his ear. David listened, nodding. After a while, David smirked. Then, patting me on the shoulder, he said,
Can't you let it go? I'll talk to my daughter about it.
But
Or do you want to quit?
He subtly threatened. Of course, they can't just fire me when I haven't done anything wrong, but they can choose not to renew my contract. In that case, it's as good as being fired. I had no choice but to keep my mouth shut. I looked away and slightly lowered my head.
That's better. Now, take care of my daughter.
Yes, I reluctantly replied. But I didn't just sit around doing nothing. I discussed strategies with Henry. Henry, you should say something to her too.
Yeah, okay.
Henry gave a vague response. I could understand his hesitation. Sure, Henry is Catalan's supervisor, but his boss is Catalan's father. I get your position, Henry, but you are her supervisor after all. Catalan joined the company about 6 months ago. Apparently, she had never worked before then. But at 27, with everyone around her getting married, Catalan started wanting to get married too. She also thought having a job would make her more attractive for marriage. So she asked her dad to get her a job at this company. Given that background, no one wanted to be involved with Catalan. In the end, most employees refused to be her mentor, and I, a contract employee, was stuck with the role. Basically, I was given the role of mentor without any real authority. So I thought Henry, her supervisor, would be able to address her behavior.
But David doesn't think highly of us.
Really?
Yeah. Don't you remember when we got married, Claire?
When Henry said that, I recalled something. It was right after our marriage was decided. We went straight to inform our boss, David, who was then just a section chief. Even then, David wasn't pleased. Later, I found out he was against our marriage. He particularly disliked the idea of an office romance. Are they not serious about their jobs? Are they just here to date? That's what he seemed to think. But it couldn't be helped. I was drawn to Henry's reliability at work. One of the most noteworthy incidents was when Henry covered for a big mistake I made. That day, I received a call from a client saying the ordered products hadn't arrived. Panicking, I checked and found an input error in the order management sheet. And the person responsible for the input was me. The mistake was so big, my mind went blank. At that moment, Henry was the first to act. He quickly checked the inventory and delivered the missing items. Thanks to him, the issue was resolved. I thanked Henry tearfully. Thank you so much. You saved me.
Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is how you fix them.
Since Henry was my senior colleague, it might have been natural for him to handle it that way. But to me, Henry seemed very dependable. That's why I confessed to him and we started dating. So, marrying Henry, whom I met at work, felt inevitable to me. It doesn't matter what David thinks. But David still seems to hold a grudge. We got married 13 years ago. It's such an old issue.
Old or not, David doesn't think highly of us.
But
Anyway, that's why I don't want to provoke him too much.
Henry was indirectly telling me to overlook Catalan's behavior. Reluctantly, I decided to put up with it. I had so much to say. But if the manager started targeting us, it would be the end. Even if I managed, it would be terrible for Henry if he couldn't stay at the company.
Just a little longer. Just endure it a bit more.
A little longer. Why?
Well, we're almost done saving for the house, and I might get a promotion soon.
A promotion? When I asked, Henry started talking excitedly. A while ago, Henry secured a big contract. The president praised Henry for it. Other executives also praised him unanimously. So he might get promoted soon. Henry told me this story. Is that true?
Yeah, the executive VP said so, so it must be true. Unless the manager opposes it.
So that's why he doesn't want to upset the manager. Now I understood why he told me to overlook Catalan.
If I get promoted, my salary will increase. Then, Claire, you can quit your job too, right?
Well, I guess. Indeed, we've been saving up smoothly for the house. Even if I quit now, we'd manage. And if Henry gets promoted, our income would be even more secure. I always planned to quit once we saved enough for the house. Maybe it's the right time. I slowly nodded. Okay, if you get promoted, I'll quit the company.
Are you sure?
Yes, we have enough for the house, and it's a good opportunity. I decided to endure a bit longer, as Henry suggested. And once Henry's promotion is confirmed, I'll quit the company. I finally made up my mind. After that, I felt much more relaxed. I didn't care if Catalan was late or slacking off, but I was still technically her supervisor. So I kept giving her basic warnings. I told you not to be late, didn't I?
Huh? Another nagging? You're so persistent, old lady.
Catalan's words annoyed me, but I responded with a forced smile. It's not nagging, it's a reminder. You're an adult, so act like one.
Yeah.
Catalan gave a half-hearted reply. In the past, I would have raised my voice at this point. But now that I've decided to quit, it didn't bother me anymore. Besides, I heard a rumor that Catalan might quit to get married soon. In other words, I would be gone from Catalan's life, and Catalan would be gone from Henry's life. It's a win-win situation for everyone involved. So, no matter how Catalan reacted, I didn't care anymore. A few weeks later, Henry's promotion to deputy manager was announced. I don't know exactly what a deputy manager does in general, but in our company, it's the position right below the manager. In other words, Henry was promoted from section chief to deputy manager. It happened just as Henry had said, and I was delighted. Congratulations, Henry.
Thank you, Claire. It's all thanks to your support over the past 13 years.
No, it's because of your hard work, Henry. We had this conversation last night while toasting with a slightly expensive wine. With that feeling still lingering, I decided to submit my resignation to the company. I had already talked to Henry about it. So, I visited the manager's office first thing in the morning. Once I submit my resignation to the manager, I'll be free from Catalan. I'll start dreaming about our new home. With these thoughts, I knocked on the manager's office door. The manager responded from inside. "Excuse me, do you have a moment?" I said as I entered the manager's office. David was checking his email. He glanced up briefly when he heard my voice, then quickly looked back down.
What is it? What do you want this early in the morning?
Sorry to bother you, but I have something to discuss.
Discuss? I'm busy.
David stopped what he was doing and stared at me. I hesitated, but then pulled out my resignation letter. "Here, please."
A resignation letter? Are you quitting?
David looked puzzled. I smiled back. "Yes, thank you for everything."
I see. Finally leaving, huh?
David nodded several times, seemingly satisfied. It was irritating, but I pretended not to care. Yes, my husband's promotion to deputy manager was confirmed, so I thought it was a perfect timing.
Oh, right. That's true. So you're quitting and moving back to the parents' house.
I didn't understand what David meant. As I was confused, I heard a knock.
Excuse me, David.
Without waiting for David's response, Henry walked in. I looked at Henry suspiciously. Henry, who met my gaze, quickly looked away, feeling awkward. Without looking at me, Henry approached David.
David, I brought the documents for the contract from the other day.
Good job. It seems the matter is settled then.
David said, looking back and forth between Henry and me. As I tilted my head in confusion, Henry nodded.
The work matter is now about the divorce.
I was startled by Henry's words. Then Henry turned to me without hesitation.
There's something I need to tell you.
Something you need to tell me?
Yeah, I want a divorce. I'm going to remarry the manager's daughter, Catalin.
Henry smirked. I was at a loss for words. Divorce? What do you mean by divorce? And remarry Catalin? A whirlwind of thoughts raced through my mind. I was so confused, I almost collapsed on the spot. Seeing my distress, Henry calmly said,
You've aged quite a bit, and I prefer someone younger.
What? Wait a minute.
No waiting. It's divorce, divorce. Look, I even have the papers ready.
Henry pulled out a piece of paper from his pocket. It was a divorce paper with Henry's name on it. Henry forcefully handed the paper to me. Then, as I stood there in shock, he said,
You've already submitted your resignation, right? Then take this and leave.
What? Why? What do you mean?
Working in the same place after a divorce would be awkward. Now, get out.
Henry pushed me out of the manager's office. I found myself quickly thrown out. I confronted Henry when he came out of the manager's office, but his answer was the same. He wanted a divorce to remarry Catalin. He would pay alimony, so I should sign the divorce papers immediately. He kept repeating those words. In my confusion, I signed the divorce papers. By the time I realized it, I was at home with movers working in front of me. I later found out I had called the movers myself. In the end, I had ended my 13-year marriage with Henry without understanding why. After that, I spent days and a days at my parents' house. Since I had submitted my resignation, I couldn't withdraw it. The signed divorce papers were in Henry's hands. In other words, I had lost everything. Why did this happen to me? Such thoughts crossed my mind. But after a few days, my mind began to clear. I will never forgive that man. Anger towards Henry welled up inside me. I gripped my phone tightly. I'll make them all see hell. With a resolve for revenge, I sent an email to someone. A week later, Henry suddenly called me. We hadn't even discussed alimony, and I had a lot to say. So I answered without hesitation. After taking a deep breath, I spoke. Hello, Henry. Aren't you at work? I glanced at the clock. It was just past 1 p.m. Something felt a bit official, and then Henry, sounding frantic, asked me,
Why didn't you tell me?
Huh? Tell you what?
You're the chairman's granddaughter. Why didn't you say anything before the divorce?
I thought he might apologize, but instead, he said that. I was astonished by Henry's words. Suddenly feeling fed up, I fell silent. Henry then started speaking nonstop. Here's what he said. When Henry told me he wanted a divorce, he said,
I'm divorcing you to marry the manager's daughter.
Up until that point, Henry was still smug. But a week later, everything changed. That was just a few hours ago. Henry was approached by the chairman, George, during a company visit.
How is my granddaughter doing?
Huh?
I mean my granddaughter, Claire. She became your wife, right?
That's when Henry finally understood the situation. He turned pale. How panicked was Henry? It's not hard to imagine. But so what? I was far more upset. The feeling of being betrayed by someone you trusted right in front of you is something you can't understand with just that. So I'm going to teach Henry. The despair of being betrayed right in front of your eyes. You can't escape anymore. Just now, you have placed yourself on the brink of despair. I smiled. I asked Henry on the other end of the line, "So what?"
What do you mean, so what? If I had known that, I wouldn't have divorced you.
Henry's words infuriated me. If I were the chairman's granddaughter, he wouldn't have divorced me. That means he has no interest in me as a person. Does he even realize that? No, he doesn't understand. That's why he's saying it. Even after living together for 13 years, Henry didn't care about me at all. It was a bit of a shock, but it also wiped away any guilt I had. I don't need to hold back on my revenge against Henry. Even so, I decided to give him one last chance. "So, why did you marry me?" Depending on his answer, I thought I might give him an out. But Henry's answer was beyond anything I could have imagined.
Because your dad's company is one of our major clients.
In other words, he married me to establish a connection with my father. And he apparently fabricated my mistake to save me, and then married me. Henry blurted this out. I was speechless.
Never mind that. Just come back. I need you.
Huh? You didn't need me when you wanted a divorce.
No, that's not it. The situation has changed.
Henry started explaining, almost in tears. When the chairman asked about me, Henry didn't know what to say. He couldn't very well say we had just divorced. So, Henry told the chairman,
Oh, actually, Claire is at home.
At home? Isn't she working here?
Yes, she's not working anymore. We're planning to buy a house.
he's planning to make the house with the layout I like. So, I'm gathering information about the house design. He also mentioned he was recently promoted. So, he wanted me to be a full-time housewife. Henry lied to the chairman, and the chairman believed him. Then the chairman told Henry,
Well, ask her to come to the party to update us on the house progress.
Party.
There's a networking event for executives at the hotel tomorrow night. I'll be there too, so ask Claire to come.
in other words, if I didn't show up at the party, Henry would be suspected. So he contacted me in a panic. Henry pleaded with me through tears.
Please, come to the party with me for the chairman.
No way.
Why not? If you don't come, he will think I lied.
Think you lied. You did lie. I wanted to say, but I was too astonished to speak. Meanwhile, Henry's voice grew louder.
Please, just help me out here.
Huh? Why should I help you? Take Catalin and introduce her as your new wife.
I can't do that. Are you mocking me?
Henry shouted. That's what you're doing to me, I wanted to say. Anyway, I took a deep breath. Then I answered him clearly. Anyway, we are divorced. Just report the truth to the chairman.
I'm asking because I can't do that. I'll remain here until you agree.
Here, where? I ended up asking in a halting manner. But Henry answered seriously.
Yeah, I'm right in front of your parents' house. You must be inside.
I rushed to the window. Peeking outside, I saw Henry at the front door. Sure, after the divorce, the only place I could go was my parents' house. But does he think it's normal to show up unannounced? Go away. You're being a nuisance.
No way. I won't leave until you agree.
Henry shouted loudly. His voice was so loud I could hear it directly. This would disturb the neighbors. I had to avoid that. Just go away, or I'll call the police,
The police? Go ahead and call them if you can.
Henry retorted. Annoyed, I hung up the phone immediately. A divorced woman won't keep listening to you forever. I called the police right away. Within minutes, I heard the sirens of a police car. Looking outside, I saw Henry running away, startled by the sirens. Even after Henry fled, my phone kept ringing nonstop. It was always Henry calling. Of course, I had nothing more to say to him, so I didn't answer. But what about the party? That still concerned me. Given Henry's position, not attending was not an option. But what would happen if Henry went alone? The outcome was obvious. Well, maybe I should go watch his disgrace. I laughed and made a special request to my father. Here's what it was. After hearing about the party from Henry, I contacted my father immediately. I told him to pretend I had asked for a favor. When the divorce was decided, I planned to inform my grandfather George, the chairman, by email. But I didn't mention the divorce in the email. I just said I had something to discuss. The chairman, seeing the email, must have come to see me under the guise of an inspection. But he couldn't find me. So he designated the party as the meeting place. Realizing this, I asked to meet with my father and grandfather together. If my father said so, my grandfather wouldn't refuse. This gave my father a reason to attend the party. Conveniently, my father ran a separate company from the chairman. In other words, my father was also a company executive. Therefore, it wouldn't be strange for him to be at the executive networking event. All I had to do was pretend to be my father's secretary and attend the party. That way, I could legally witness Henry's predicament. Smiling to myself, I welcomed the next day. As evening approached, the time for the party drew near. I headed to the local hotel banquet hall with my father. From a corner of the venue, I watched the proceedings, and soon the chairman arrived. Though he rarely appeared at the company, the chairman was respected by other executives. Shortly after, Henry appeared, looking nervous. The chairman immediately approached him.
Good to see you. So, where's Claire?
Oh,
Is Claire not here?
The chairman looked puzzled. Naturally, he had expected me to come. I wondered what excuse Henry would come up with. I muttered to myself and watched how things unfolded.
Where is Claire?
The chairman asked again. Finally, Henry answered.
well, Claire is not feeling well.
She's resting at home now. Henry began making excuses. George listened, looking disappointed. It would be troublesome if George believed Henry's excuses. So, I quietly moved to a corner of the venue. From behind a pillar, I called George.
Oh, wait a moment. I just got a call from Claire.
From Claire?
Henry looked startled as George answered the phone. Grandpa, long time no see.
Oh, Claire. How are you feeling?
Huh? I'm feeling great, I replied cheerfully. George frowned.
Claire, aren't you unwell today?
No, I'm fine. Who said I was sick? When I asked, George slowly turned his gaze to Henry. He stared at Henry and asked me in a lower voice,
I heard it from your husband.
Do you mean Henry? Well, he's my ex-husband now. The moment I said that, George's eyes widened. Meanwhile, Henry was in shock. Watching their reactions, I continued, barely suppressing my laughter. Actually, I divorced Henry. He prefers younger women.
I see.
Despite his calm words, George's face turned red. I added fuel to the fire by telling him more of what Henry had said. Henry is going to marry the manager's daughter. He didn't tell me, but he's aiming for a promotion.
What does this mean?
When he realized I was the chairman's granddaughter, he said he wouldn't have divorced me if he'd known. Before I could finish, the call abruptly ended. It seemed George was so angry that he accidentally hung up. Still gripping his phone, George yelled at Henry in front of him.
What were you thinking? You abandoned my granddaughter.
No, it's not like that.
Then why did you divorce her?
Yikes!
Henry immediately dropped to his knees, begging for forgiveness. I found the scene amusing and couldn't help but laugh. Soon, George started loudly berating Henry. Of course, George was the only one shouting. Henry remained on his knees, unable to say anything. He didn't move an inch. I watched the scene with a smirk. After a while, I had an idea and took a photo of Henry on his knees from a distance. This should teach you a lesson, but don't think I'm done with you yet. I muttered as I checked the time on my phone. It was just past 7 p.m. She should be here by now. I glanced towards the entrance. Even at a time like this, Catalin is late. I sighed. Actually, I had invited Catalin to this event. Well, saying I invited her might be misleading. I called Catalin and said, "There's a party at the hotel tonight."
A party? So what?
It's a local executive networking event. Lots of wealthy people will be there.
Really? For real?
Her tone changed instantly. Got her, I thought, smirking. Henry will be there too. So why don't you join him? I was essentially egging her on. Catalin took the bait. So she was bound to show up. When she arrived, another commotion would follow. She should be here by now. Why is she always late? Just as I was tapping my foot, a flashy woman sauntered into the venue. In a brightly colored dress and garish makeup, Catalin stood out in a bad way. As soon as she entered, Catalin headed straight for the chairman, George. She probably knew his face. Ignoring Henry, who was on his knees nearby, Catalin greeted to George.
George, thank you for yesterday.
And who might you be?
Oh, come on. I'm Catalin, the manager David's daughter. We met yesterday during the inspection, remember?
Catalin laughed crudely. At that moment, George seemed to piece everything together.
That's right. You're David's daughter. By the way, are you married?
Yes, my husband is Henry, the deputy manager in the sales department.
I thought he already had a wife.
When George asked Catalin, she burst out laughing.
Oh, you mean that old lady? We got rid of her.
Got rid of her? Why?
Because she was in the way, and it's better to have a younger wife.
Catalin continued, explaining how she had been involved with Henry for a long time. Henry preferred a younger woman, and his ex-wife was annoying at work, always nagging and complaining. So they got rid of her from the workplace too.
She's probably sitting alone now, crying because she lost both her husband and her job.
Catalin laughed crudely again. I had invited Catalin to cause a scene, hoping to lower her standing and get some revenge. But I hadn't expected her to say so much. This is bad, I thought, and quickly approached Catalin. Just as George was about to shout, I stepped between them. Watch your mouth. George was surprised to see me. Catalin, equally shocked, quickly scowled.
What? Why are you here?
That doesn't matter. Do you not know the meaning of the word limit? Catalin pouted at my words.
Huh? You're nobody to me now. You're no longer my colleague, so don't act high and mighty.
I'm not acting high and mighty. I'm just telling you not to insult me openly. Going too far would make things irreversible. I wanted to say so, but Catalin just laughed.
What? Are you saying you're hurt at your age?
It's no use. This is irreversible. I pointed to Catalin's feet. By the way, do you know what that is?
That
Catalin looked down where I pointed. She saw Henry on his knees.
Henry, what are you doing?
Henry is apologizing to the chairman.
To the chairman? For what?
For insulting me just like you did. Catalin tilted her head and then snorted.
Huh? Why would he apologize to the chairman for insulting you?
Because I am the chairman's granddaughter.
Huh? Wait, granddaughter? You.
Catalin blinked in shock, looking between me and George. George nodded quietly in response to her gaze. Catalin finally realized she was in deep trouble.
What? But you never mentioned it.
Of course, I wouldn't openly declare it. I didn't want to be judged based on that. But Catalin, who always hid behind her father's power, probably never thought that way. I sighed and tried to reason with Catalin. That's why, if you want to apologize, now's your chance.
What? Are you using the chairman's authority to threaten me? Don't be ridiculous.
Catalin shoved a nearby table. The sound of expensive plates shattering echoed. Oh no, she's done it now. Catalin didn't seem to realize the consequences of her tantrum. Soon, she started shouting loudly.
It's all your fault. If you had just divorced Henry sooner.
Catalin pushed me. Finally, the security guards at the venue rushed over. They quickly restrained Catalin and asked George what to do.
Call the police. Otherwise, she'll never learn.
What? The police? Why?
Catalin now turned on George. I stepped in to calm her down. You're an adult. You need to take responsibility like one.
What does that even mean?
Catalin gritted her teeth in frustration. In the end, Catalin was taken away by the police without apologizing. Later, she was arrested for assault and property damage. Only then did she seem to come to her senses. She became quiet and reportedly cried and apologized to the police officers. But apologizing doesn't erase the consequences. Catalin was put on trial and eventually fined. Even so, she might have thought she got off easy. She probably believed that her father would pay the fines and compensation. But by then, her father and Henry were broke. David was held accountable by the chairman for Catalin's actions and had no choice but to resign. He looked for another job, but no company would hire him. News of Catalin's incident likely spread through the party attendees. Unable to find a new job, David now works a low-paying security guard jobs. As for Henry, he received a reprimand from George, but no further punishment. Infidelity wasn't a fireable offense. That's how George decided, based on the law. But just because Henry didn't get fired doesn't mean everything was fine. After his conflict with me and the chairman, Henry quickly became isolated at work. Unable to bear the loneliness, Henry soon quit the company. Like David, he couldn't find another job and ended up working at a corner store. Given their situations, neither of them could afford to help Catalin. Needless to say, Catalin had to work to pay off her fines and compensation herself. Now, she's reportedly working late hours at a high-paying nightclub. As for me, the chairman, my grandfather, asked me to return to my job, but I declined his request because I had already started working at my father's company. Sorry, Grandpa. When I quit, I asked Dad for a job.
I see. As long as you're happy, I don't mind at all.
George said with a smile, showing the familiar face I had seen many times in my childhood.